All right, going live. Careers in finance. You guys ready? Time for some careers in finance talk. All right, hold on. Just wait for a minute to get some. All right, if you get on the call, just type in a comment or a question. We'll get started in just a moment. How are you guys doing? Are you getting outside and exercising during this COVID time? Very important. This week I've been stuck inside because I'm working on a whole new course that's called Finance Made Ridiculously Simple. And that's quite a fun course that I'm making. I'm almost done with it, and then I'll come out to the world with it. In fact, that course will be incorporated into the Valuation Masterclass. Now, I'm going to start off just talking a little bit before we get kicked off. And that is just to talk about a question that somebody asked is, do the same old valuation methods still work these days in the new normal, new situation? And my answer is absolutely yes. In fact, the more things change, the more they stay the same. One of the examples that people ask a lot about is, what do I do? How do I value a company when the interest rate is zero, or the risk-free rate or the discount rate is zero? The first thing to remember is that you are not discounting equity flows such as dividends or free cash flow to equity by the risk-free rate. You're discounting it by some equity discount rate, the cost of equity. And yes, the value of the interest component of that is, a part of it, but ultimately it's the total discount rate that you want to be thinking of. That's the first thing. So if you normally discount a company at 10%, you may discount it at, two less, maybe at 8%. It's possible, but that's not going to mean you're going to have a zero discount rate. The other thing is, of course, when you blend in the weighted average cost of capital, the costs are going to go down. But that brings me to point number two. And point number two, when interest rates are really low and you're trying to value companies, remember that your interest rate is to infinity. Interest rate is to infinity, just like the cash flows are to infinity. So when you're valuing a company, when interest rates are zero, or let's say risk-free rates are zero, it's going to lower your discount rate, but it isn't going to make your discount rate zero. So that's the first thing. What I also think is that analysts tend to over-adjust when things are really low interest rates, as they are right now. They just assume that they're going to be low interest rates forever. And when interest rates are really high, they just assume that interest rates are going to be high forever. But there's no guarantee to that. In fact, I looked at a long dated chart on interest rates and inflation rate. And if you looked at that chart and I didn't tell you what it was, in fact, Alex may even have that chart, the chart of 103 years that's in the Build Your Wealth course. I have a chart of 103 years of interest rates and inflation rate. And what you're going to see from that is that if you looked at that chart, you would think that inflation rate is going to fly up. Now, you may say, Andrew, that's crazy. How could inflation be high? Now, by the way, make sure to leave me a message. If you've got questions, get into the chat room. I'm taking questions now. It's 8 o'clock here in Bangkok, Thailand. Welcome to Careers in Finance. My name's Andrew Stotz, and I'm taking your questions. So put them in the chat. I'm just going to type in there and say, welcome. So I hope to see you in there, and just make sure you send me your questions, and I'd love to see them. So the point that I'm making is that when you look at interest rates right now, another good argument that I heard from one of my podcast guests, actually, Raoul Powell, what he said from Real Vision, what he was talking about, how the bond market follow the bond market. What is the bond market telling you? The bond market is telling you that there is no risk of inflation. Look at how low bond prices are, how low bond yields are. There's no risk of inflation. And he said, believe the bond markets. But, my PhD dissertation was about the performance of equity analysts forecasting earnings in the equity market. And I found that they were not very accurate at all. And I don't have any reason to believe that the bond market is more accurate than the equity market. Maybe bonds are easier to predict, but I wouldn't say that means that, they can predict them very accurately. And so remember that it was only 10 years or so ago when we had interest rates here, and then all of a sudden they were at zero. Nobody would have predicted that they were going to be at zero. There's WZ. Hi, welcome. So nobody would have predicted that interest rates are going to be zero after the 2008 crisis. And certainly nobody predicted that the interest rates would be zero for 10 years. And even look at the pandemic, nobody would have predicted that governments would shut down economies all across the world. Nobody would have predicted that in January of this year. So when I tell you that it's very possible that interest rates could rise significantly, yeah, there's Tristy. Yeah, nice to talk. I think I saw you on LinkedIn. I was just thinking about some of my books here. I was going to pull out one, but I'll get one out later. But anyways, the point is that interest rates can reverse and they can go up. And so when you're valuing a company, when the risk-free rate is negative or zero, you can still value that company. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. Now, I think tonight I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about a couple of things. But before we get into it, what I want to say is if you have any questions about careers in finance, make sure you put them in the chat room so that I can see them and I can try to respond to them. I've got a few questions that have come in and I will address those in a bit. But I thought it would be really fun to share with you some of the research I've recently been doing and a little chapter of my upcoming online course, Finance Made Ridiculously Simple. So how about that? Would you guys like that? I think I'm going to open that up and I'll share the screen. Let's see. Hold on. All right. Let me share my screen. 1 second. All right. Now, make sure to ask questions. If you got any questions about careers in finance, you let me know. All right. So I'm going to share with you my screen and talk about careers in finance. And basically, I'm going to go through the lessons from income statements of the top 10 countries in the world. I'll tell you a little bit about my story, and then we'll take some Q&A, and I'll teach you how you can learn more about valuation and the Valuation Masterclass. And I have a special offer for you if you're on this call for the Valuation Masterclass. So make sure you stay to the end. Now, let's get started into it. And before we get started, you can send messages on your computer. If you've got a mobile phone, you can send them through on your mobile phone. But let's get into this. What I want to teach you today in this webinar is I want you to familiarize yourself with the performance of each of the top 10 countries from its income statement, and then learn to compare these to the global average and understand why particular margins are different between countries. So you remember what a common size financial statement is. It shows each financial statement item as a percentage of one figure, and it allows us to compare a company over time or against another company. And in the P&L, which we're going to be talking about today, it's revenue. So let's look at that for a moment. Let's assume that we have a company here that has revenue of 5,973 and all costs, from cost of goods sold down to the to the taxes of 5,272. And that gives a net profit of 701. If we want to common size that, we just say cost divided by revenue. That's 5,272 divided by the 5,973. And that's 88%. And then net profit divided by revenue. And that's 701 divided by the same 5,973. And that gives us 12%. So what are the benefits? Well, you can analyze a company over time and you can compare different companies. So let's just look at a company right here. Here's Apple. And here is their simple P&L. And you can see that the net profit margin of this company has been steady at 21, 22, 21%. Now we can also compare against other companies, like here is Microsoft. Now, if we just compare the absolute P&L, we can see that Apple produced 260 billion dollars in revenue, and Microsoft only 125. But boy, look at how much Microsoft has increased from 96 to 125. But it gets easier when you make it into a common size statement. And here you can see that it's gone, and for Microsoft's net margin, it's gone from 26 to 15 to 31. Now, these are the 10 companies that I'm going to look at. These are the top 10 company stock markets around the world. Are you in one of these? Well, first, let's look at the USA. And here, I want to ask a question, and what you can see on this, I'm going to use my ink to draw on this, so just give me a second. What you can see on this is that the gross profit margin is 32.6. Now, also remember that in the global, now you'll see I have 1,443 companies that are in this USA data set. And that compares to almost 12,000 companies across the whole world in my data set. So, but we know that the US companies are really, really, really big. And therefore, the global index in the center column, that global index of all the companies in the world basically includes the US. The US is heavily weighted. If we remove the US from that, it wouldn't be 28.7. It would be more like, let's say, 27.5 or something like that. So the gross margin is really high. So my question to you is, why is the gross margin high for the United States relative to most other countries? Write your answer in the comment section. Why do you think it's so high? And what about net margin? Net margin is almost 7%. Why do you think it's so high? I'll give you a hint. That's one of the hints right there. All right. I'm going to come back and answer that question, but I'm going to be looking for your comments and your answers in the chat area, and then I'll answer it there. Next is China. Look at that gross profit margin. Now, this is 1,694 large and liquid companies in China. For those of you that don't know the Chinese market, there's more than 3,000 companies listed there, and they're almost all large and liquid. And here you can see the gross profit margin, 17%. Why would the gross profit margin of China be so much lower than the global average? I have an answer for that, but I want to see what you say, and then we'll talk about it when I can get access to the chat room. Now, let's look at Japan. Why is Japan's net profit margin so low? Remember, this is an 18-year average. Why is Japan's net profit margin so low? Let's look at the UK. Whoa, the UK is super high gross profit margin, very high EBIT, and very high net profit margin. Why would that be? Now here's India. India is also pretty high on almost all those measures. Hong Kong is also very high. Look at the net margin here, 8.6. That's 539 companies I have in my data set for Hong Kong. And here's Canada. Canada is about in line, a little bit higher, but it has a lower SG&A. Why is that? Why does it have a lower SG&A? What is SG&A? It's selling, general, and administrative expenses. So it's the salaries related to selling, the general and administrative expenses related to running the business. Here's Germany. And why was the net margin lower? And here's Switzerland. My goodness, look at that gross margin. It's higher than any other country at 38%. And it's 7.3. But you can also, net margin, but you can also see that SG&A is 22.5%. So they're spending a lot on their staff, on marketing, on legal fees, on all those things. Here's Korea, the lowest level, or one of the lowest level on net margin as well as gross margin. Why would that be? All right, so what have you learned? Switzerland had the highest gross profit margin while China had the lowest. Switzerland has the highest other costs like SG&A while China has the lowest. And the UK has the highest EBIT margin while Japan has the lowest. And finally, Hong Kong has the highest net margin, while Japan has the lowest. All right, now I'm going to take us back to the webinar. Here we are. And now I'm back. All right. So let's see some of the answers. Yeah. Chatterbox, offshore manufacturing. And I think what you mean by offshore manufacturing is what Dri City said is cheaper cost of goods for China. But why is China? It's possible that the cost of manufacturing the products is cheaper. But I would say that actually, Mohammed Abdul Alhim, good to see you again. The service sector portion is high in the U.S. Yes, that's also a good reason for the U.S. But let's just go through some of these. The first one is we talk about the U.S. The U.S. has a higher gross profit margin because of branding. Branding has allowed the U.S. companies to charge a high price. They're competing much more in brand. Look at China. China's not competing on brand. You're not owning Chinese brands right now, although that's expanding. But China is more of an outsource or offshore manufacturing location, and therefore it's harder for them to negotiate higher and higher prices. And so that's one of the reasons why China is, in fact, in that situation. All right, now let me, Switzerland's also interesting to me, how high the gross profit margin is. So these are some of the charts and graphs that I'll be going through in my online class called Finance Made Ridiculously Simple. And I'll finish all the recordings for this class hopefully by the end of the weekend. And then it'll be ready and out there for sale. All right. So let me just tell you a little bit about my life. Let's talk about careers in finance. And I just want to tell you one story. And that story is about my first boss named John. And when I started my job, I was 28 years old. And it was my first time working in finance, although I had studied finance. And I was super excited to take the job. And what I found when I found that job as an analyst was that it was awesome. And I set the goal, and I told John I want to be the #1 analyst in Thailand. Well, little did I know that it would take me about 14 years or so to get to that position. I had a lot of great jobs, and I was head of research, and I really did very well. But the point is that getting voted #1 is not easy. It takes a lot of commitment. John and I are still friends. In 2008 is when I got voted #1 analyst in Thailand. And John has always been a big supporter of mine. There's a couple of lessons in that. The first lesson is, set your goals high. You can achieve them, but just never give up because it takes time. It took me 14 years to get there. The second thing that I would say is build relationships with your, boss and keep those relationships. Right? All right. Now let's just see. So also, as Alex mentioned, I'm going to be adding the FMRS, Finance Made Ridiculously Simple, into the Valuation Masterclass. So for those people that are signing up for the Valuation Masterclass, they'll get free access to this course. So even though you can't buy the course now, you can actually buy the access with no change in price when you buy the Valuation Masterclass. All right, I see some questions. So someone asked a question about the right mindset for overcoming this crisis. I see this crisis as like I'm in a boat with my team, and my job is to keep the boat from tipping over and also to get to the shore. So I think that leadership and risk management are keys for the mindset to get through this crisis. And when I talk about risk management, I'll just talk briefly about one of the strategies that we implement, which is an all-weather type of strategy. And basically right now, our position is only 5% in the US market. Normally that could be 30% or 25% or 15%, but it's only 5% in the US market right now because we think that that's the most expensive market and it really has a chance to fall. And the rest of it is allocated to some other markets, but we've got about 25% in gold and 25% in fixed income. I view those asset classes as ways that we can protect our downside if that market falls. And what do you think? You think the market's going to fall over the next couple of months, or you think it's going to rise? I'm curious to know your answer. Type it into the chat room. I have my opinion, but I want to hear about your opinion. All right. So the next question I got, and feel free to put any questions in, is how is today's market different from 20 years ago? I think the key thing about today's market is that there's so many more products nowadays that an investor can get. And those products can serve a lot of different purposes, whether that's some sort of hedging, whether that's getting exposure outside of your home country. All of those things can be valuable with the products. But when I started, which was literally more than 20 years ago, it was 29 years ago, when I started, the only thing you could really buy in the stock market was stocks. So if you didn't know how to create a portfolio of stocks, you were in trouble. You were in trouble. Also, let's just see. Alex sent me something where I'll send you a little detail about that all-weather strategy I'm mentioning. He just told me to put that link in there because you guys can see it. But that gives you some detail of our current allocation in the all-weather strategy. All right, any questions out there? I'll go on to the next one here. So the next question is, all right, Chatterbox. Let's see, hold on. Was there any reason why you chose Thailand specifically to start your career rather than other emerging markets or finance hubs? It's a good question. I mean, I was interested in Thailand. I originally actually had a Cambodian girlfriend when I was in university in California, in Long Beach, where 10% of the population is Cambodian. And we eventually broke up, but remained great friends. But when I was with her and her family, I became very familiar with Southeast Asia and the culture here. So when I came to Thailand for my first time to travel, I really liked it. And I liked how comfortable people were. But also I liked the fact that the economy was booming and they were welcoming foreigners to some extent. China wasn't welcoming foreigners at that time. And so from that perspective, it wasn't as open compared to Thailand. This is talking about 1992. I didn't go to Hong Kong or Singapore because I felt like those were already pretty big cities that would be just like going to New York or something to work. So, all right. Someone asked me, what are 3 personal traits that help you become a #1 analyst in Thailand? Well, I don't know about you, and I don't think I can give advice for you. I can only give you advice of what worked for me. And then if you can adapt that into your life, I think that's awesome. So what I would say is that #1 for me was that I wake up very early. I have a fresh mind in the morning. I have good discipline not to go to bed too late. And when I wake up early in the morning, I start right off the bat. I take a shower and I get ready and I sit down and I start working. So this morning, I actually was sitting at my desk right here at 4 a.m. Right now, it's 8:30 almost in the evening. But I started working at 4 a.m. and it allowed me to spend about 3 or 4 hours of concentrated time to work on the finance made ridiculously simple course. But I also have a lot of other work that I'm working on. So that's #1. #2 is I don't drink alcohol or do any drugs, and I go to bed very early. I think that is also some very important things because if you're losing sleep, that can be a lot of trouble. It's hard to focus when you're losing sleep. And I would say the other thing is that I have no stress in my life. I highly recommend. I have a trick of how you can remove stress from your life tonight, starting from tonight. Would you like to know that trick? What do you think, Alex? Do you think people would like to know that trick? Show me a comment if you'd like to know that trick. The trick is how to remove stress from your life today, right now. So I'll tell you how I did it. The way I do it is I take the word stress out of my life. I don't use the word stress. I stop saying, yeah, there's John. I stop saying, I'm so stressed. This is stressful. I feel stress. I stop saying that word. And I challenge you to stop saying that word as of right now. And that really helped me to lower the stress. Now, you can sometimes use a word like pressure. I'm under pressure. There's time pressure and all that. But the stress part is deadly. So I don't say it. All right. Any other questions? I'm going to talk to you just briefly about the Valuation Masterclass. For those of you that want to, I know John's cranking through it himself right now. And if you want to join the Valuation Masterclass, I would welcome you into the course. I'll just tell you a little bit about it and what it is. And then if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Also, remember, you can ask any career and finance questions while I'm presenting. Just set them up and I'll answer that as soon as I get done presenting this. So let's look at this for a moment. And basically, I designed the Valuation Masterclass to help young people get practical experience in valuation, to gain confidence and advance their career, to increase their efficiency because they're using my tools, and to become an expert and make an impact. We now have more than actually 1,500 students from 31 countries now. Alex, we probably should update that. And I call the Valuation Masterclass the Bootcamp for Valuation. The Valuation Masterclass is the complete, proven, step-by-step course to guide you from novice to valuation expert. I can get you from zero to expert. Now, your journey in there is at module 1. That's where you would start to build that foundation, and then later modules will help bring you mastery. You get practical experience in equity valuation because by the end of module 5, you'll have valued about 20 companies and reviewed another 10. In fact, one of my students from Nigeria just submitted one of her latest valuations, which was very good. And the point is, this is real practical experience. And it's companies from different sectors, countries, and situations that you'll be valuing. You'll learn how to analyze companies and write reports like a professional analyst, and of course, you'll get a certificate of completion. Now, you're going to gain confidence in your valuation skills from your practical experience in the Valuation Masterclass. When others see your depth of knowledge that you know how to do valuation, they'll also feel confident in your skills. And you'll increase efficiency because you're using the value model. And that's the highly efficient valuation framework that helped me become a #1 analyst. So you're using my model. More efficient people, of course, are more competitive. Now, lastly, it's important that you've got to learn how to make an impact. And here's one of my students said that, it boosts my confidence, what she said about the Valuation Masterclass. So becoming a certified valuation expert is hard. There's 5 modules and about 200 hours of learning. That's why I call it the boot camp for valuation. But after passing module 5, I'll do whatever I can to help you get your dream job. In fact, I just introduced one of my module 5 graduates to a company in the Philippines, and they're talking to them. And I'll introduce any one of my module 5 students, and occasionally I'll introduce even younger ones like module 4 or module 3. The reason why I'm comfortable to call anybody to help you get a job is because if you pass module 5, I know you have what it takes. So if you're inspired, you really want to become a valuation expert, then take up this special offer. It only applies for those that are on the webinar, and it's only available today. So we're offering 40% off of the Valuation Masterclass. That means you get it for $120. The normal price is $200. But today only, you also get the bonus book, 9 Valuation Mistakes and How to Avoid Them, that I wrote. That's a $10 value, and that's free. And you're going to get the How to Start Building Your Wealth, Investing in the Stock Market book. That's also a $10 value. So what do you get? Module 1, $200 value. 9 Valuation Mistakes is a $10 value. Build Your Wealth is a $10 value. That's $220 in value, all for $120. That's today only. And here's how you can get it. Now, if you've got any questions, put them into the chat. Most important thing is I have a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you don't like anything, you don't even have to answer any questions. I just give you your money back. So there's the webinar code. I think that Alex or myself can share that. But let's now go back to the presentation. All right, let me get my camera back on. Now, we have any questions out there? Any questions about careers in finance, about Valuation Masterclass, or about anything else? Let me know. I'm going to stand up because I've been sitting all day. But I got one of those standing desks, so let me just move that baby up. Hold on one second. All right, any questions? Somebody asked me, what's my favorite book? What's my favorite book on my bookshelf? Somebody just asked me that. You want to know? This is probably one of my favorite books. I'm going to get it for you. It's right over here. Your Money and Your Brain by Jason Zweig. His name is Jason Zweig. And this is a great book. And what it does is it teaches you that investing is a physical activity. You really have a physical reaction to it. So, all right, let's see. Hold on one second. I'm just going to put that link out there. If you've got any questions, let me know. Alex and I have put the link out there. So if you want to take the Valuation Masterclass, I'd be happy to have you as my student. And you're going to learn a lot about valuation. All right. Any questions? Any more questions? Good. Well, I want to thank you all for attending. And we talked about, the P&Ls of different companies or countries. We've talked about, some of my lessons. Feel free to ask any questions. Yeah. Do I listen to any podcasts? Yeah, Ryan, I listen to Peter Schiff. I like what he talks about. It's interesting. I also listen to the Ron Paul Liberty Report, and that one helps me a lot. Think about things. I listen to BBC. I recently been listening to, what's his name? O'Shaughnessy. What works? Can't find his book, but Sean O'Shaughnessy's, what's the name of it? I forgot the name of it. And recently I just signed up for Rick, the Bogleheads Investor by Rick Perry, I think it is. So those are some. As far as mailing is concerned, I don't do a lot of mailing. I don't receive a lot of newsletters. Basically, I'm trying to reduce the amount of inflow that comes into my brain so that I can kind of think about something. So when I want to learn something, I go to some of the sources that I like. All right. Kitty Pong says, how long does a student require to complete regarding the Valuation Masterclass? The Valuation Masterclass is long and it's hard because you've got to value 20 companies. So it could take somewhere between, let's say, 3 and 6 months, depending on your dedication. But it takes time, and each company that you value, then, you value that company. Then you have to submit it to the other students in the Facebook group and to myself. So you'll have to do a lot of drafts and all that. And so it can take a while. But the point is, by the time you're done, the letter of recommendation that you'll get from me is just, awesome. And I'll call anybody to try to get you a job offer. So Alex is reminding me that the guy that I'm talking about is Jim O'Shaughnessy. And he's got a podcast called Infinite Loops. So I listened to that recently. I also listened to his son's podcast, the Investor Field Guy, Patrick O'Shaughnessy. Yeah, his is good. Okay. So Christian says, can I still finish the second module of valuation class even though I'm months behind from that scholarship? Now, if you have a scholarship or you've received a scholarship in the past, just send me an email and I'll talk to you about that. And we'll make sure that you get the full benefit. So just send me an email, Christian. And my email address, I think you already have it. It's me@andrewstotts.com. Send me an email and we'll work that out. All right. Any other questions? Any other questions? Ryan, of course, I also like anything by Raoul Pal. Anything he's talking about. I don't subscribe to Real Vision, but I think Alex does. And I do try to watch anything I can about what he says. He's great. And he was also on my podcast. So you can listen to his episode on my worst investment ever. Let me just see, what episode was that? Hold on. If you go to my worst investment ever and you say Raoul, should be able to see it. Maybe Alex can help me find it. There it is. Episode 137. Episode 137. Anything Raoul Pal says, is worth listening to. And I got the link right here. I'm just going to put it in there. But I like listening to him. I'm listening to him right now. Today I was listening to him. Yep. All right. Any other questions? Good. Yeah. 1:37. Well, since I've been up since 4 in the morning, I'm going to get myself to bed. But I want to thank you all for attending, and I'll try to answer any questions that you have and hopefully bring some more interesting topics. I think I can bring more out of the course I've just created, Finance Made Ridiculously Simple. You'll learn more about that coming soon. But it's for people who really want to learn financial analysis and understanding financial statements really, really well. This course is for you. And if you sign up for the Valuation Masterclass, you'll also get free access to that course right now, because that course will eventually be incorporated into it. So I want to thank you all. I hope that you join the Valuation Masterclass and we see you in there, and have a great, great night.